this is going to be a duo now. Ms. Ewa Barczyk and Professor Neal Pease are going to do a reminiscence together. Ewa Barczyk is currently Director of University Libraries at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. She was born in Cambridge in the United Kingdom of Polish parents and grew up in Chicago. She holds degrees from Loyola University in psychology, University of Kansas, SAS, and Southern Connecticut State University library degree. She worked at Yale University Library from 76 to 83 as a colleague of Barbara Bacchus-McCorkle and served as a senior reference librarian from 81 to 83. Ewa began her employment at UWM Libraries in 1985, serving in a variety of capacities, and then in 2006 assumed her current position as director. And I'll also introduce Professor Neal Pease, who is the current chair of the Department of History at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. One of our very own, a Lawrence native. He earned 2 degrees in history at the University of Kansas and received his PhD in history at Yale. He's been a member of the faculty at UWM since 1983 and is the incoming president of the Polish American Historical Association. He's the author of 2 books, including the recently published Rome's Most Faithful Daughter, The Catholic Church in Independent Poland, 1914 to 1939, which came out with Ohio State University Press? Ohio U Press in 2009, and you can look at it back in the back here in the book exhibit.
Yes, please.
So please welcome Neal.
We're going to have to do a tag team here, so we'll be going back and forth. And while we're getting the PowerPoints up, let me just say, I can't really express what a pleasure it is on so many levels to be here. And we hope that you'll think our presentation is worth your time. Now, truth in advertising moment here. It shows up in the program as returning medieval manuscripts to Poland, something like that. And we are going to talk about that. We will, I promise. but as we were planning this, well, it's supposed to be reminiscences, so maybe we'll work some of that in. And so we kind of got back and forth. Well, let's tweak it, and we kind of had to compromise about this or that. So, just to cover my bases, anything we say that you like is Eva's idea. and the stuff that's not any good, that's my idea. Okay? So, but I hope that the overall impression that you'll get is we want to leave you with a sense of how our time here at KU not only powerfully influenced our professional careers, but indeed our entire lives. So with that, we had to come up with another title. We're really bad at this. We're looking for alliteration, Kansas to Krakow. It works kind of, right?
We fit it in somehow.
Yeah. Let me start just by sort of introducing myself. As you heard, this is a homecoming for me. I am a Lawrence native, and I grew up literally and figuratively in the shadow of the University of Kansas. I was raised in a house, literally a stone's throw from the university on the south side, and my mother was a KU alumna, and my father was a huge KU sports fan. So I grew up, I saw Wilt Chamberlain and JoJo White play basketball, and every home game that Gale Sayers ever played for the University of Kansas. And so it was just a given. There was no doubt about this is not the most this is not the most personally embarrassing picture that is going to
We'll get to those.
Wait till you get to the 1970s. But as you can see, I was destined to go to the hometown university. Now, by contrast, Eva's road to Mount Oread was a little less predictable and indirect.
And
Isn't that adorable?
As you heard, I was born in England, political immigrant parents who were forced out of Poland at the end of, after the Warsaw Uprising, ended up in England because of the government in exile. So, as you know, from my name, you know I'm Polish, and from my roots, I was a little girl with my costume, and I am now a grown woman, and I have a big size costume now too. So I have continued the tradition. But, so my road was a little more circuitous, as you heard, to Chicago, and then we'll talk about, I think Neal will talk a little bit about, how I got here. It is a happenstance of history.
Going back, I grew up in Lawrence, and as you have already heard, Lawrence was a small town back then, sort of the 50s and 60s, and looking back, I knew a lot of the people who were instrumental in the Slavic program here before I even thought of them as scholars. They were literally next door neighbors. Roy and Betty Laird and their kids were literally next door neighbors. Through them, I met Jarek and Mora Kekokiewicz. And then, when I got to high school, I became friends and debate teammates with Rob Backus, who is the oldest son of Oswald and Barbara Backus. And by this means, I got drawn into the very active orbit of the Backus family. I knew these people as parents of my friends before I knew them as scholars or anything like that. And actually, I became well familiar with the Backuses because they were the long-suffering hosts of the gatherings of our mostly well-behaved high school circle of friends. Mostly well-behaved. And actually...
Barbara's nodding.
And actually, Rob is indirectly responsible for my eventual career choice, because one day, I think I was a sophomore, and just sort of knocking around taking courses at KU, and he said, look, I'm going to sign up for this course in Polish and Central European history. You're not doing anything. You sign up too, and we'll just go together. And it was a course that was taught by Anna Chanchawa there in the back, and I got hooked and never looked back. But of course, as you know, Professor Backus died way before his time, and so he was a familiar, almost fatherly figure to me. But Eva never met the man. But by the time she got here in the early '70s, the legends were already spreading.
Well, as you heard at lunch, his secretary's name, Denise Haycock, was mentioned, and when I came to Kansas, I worked as a student assistant in the office for the Slavic Studies program. And Denise regaled me with many stories, but two that come to mind and are, I think, embody the spirit of Professor Backus. I remember one time she was saying she heard a commotion in his office, ran in to see what was going on. There he was, stomping over his garbage, thinking that they supposed he had thrown a cigarette butt or something in it, so there was a fire gushing and he was putting it out. Another time, she hadn't seen him, as I understand, he would come in very early before she would, and so she heard him working in his office. But after several hours, he came out and was saying, well, Denise, I must have slept badly. I mean, I don't know, everything's hurting today. And if you knew Denise, you know she could be very calm, and she says to Professor Backus, well, if you took that hanger out from your jacket, maybe it didn't hurt so much. So these are the stories that I heard.
Now, on a more serious level, of course, he was also one of the moving spirits behind the institution of an exchange program between the University of Kansas and Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, Poland. And in the normal course of things, it just became, I was going to KU, I was a student here, I was pursuing a history major. I was interested in Polish and Central European history. What was I going to do? I was going to go to Poznań. So in 1972, summer, I sign up to go to Poznań, and guess who I meet there?
And how did I get on the KU exchange program? I'm growing up in Chicago, Kansas. Whoever heard of Kansas and Lawrence? However, Professor Chinchama, and her name keeps coming up, was in Chicago at some kind of meeting of Polish teachers, instructors, professors, met my father, who came home, and at this point I had already finished my bachelor's. I was looking to go to grad school. My father comes home and says, I met a professor, very nice professor from Kansas, and she said, in a couple of months there's a program going to Poland, to Poznań, and they have scholarships, and they still have room. And being the good daughter, wanted to keep my parents happy, and thought a year in Poland, fully paid, getting to know more about Poland. I had not lived there. What's wrong with this picture? So I sign up, and off I go on the KU Poznań Exchange, and we were escorted by Bill Fletcher and Joe Conrad, and it was a fun excursion. And there were 6 of us, and 5 of the 6 of us have continued to be in contact. A couple of pictures from, I don't know, I was in my black and white phase of photography at the time. That's my future husband and our future best man, and myself. We were in the future library.
All very incestuous.
Yes, we're all readings. Kind of the old Poland that you wouldn't see anymore. I was going around taking a lot of pictures.
Yeah. Then we come to Kansas. Eva had never been to Kansas. I had grown up here. And the day she arrived, there was a commotion in the tree outside the house where she was going to be staying. And she asked what it was. It was just an alley cat or something like that. I said, well, that's a bobcat. They're native, they roam around. You don't have to worry too much about them. But stay clear. She believed it. So we both had a graduate school at Kansas, and hey, what can I say? It was the 1970s. We all looked like that. The whole decade has much to answer for, right?
And my focus here was on Polish literature with Jadwiga Mauer. And one thing led to another, and
as they say.
Yes. And so, as a result of the program, as I was digging through some pictures, I found, and I won't say it was too long. Yeah, I had my report card here, and since it had the little bird on it, I thought I'd bring it along. And now we're moving on to the next phase of our life. I don't know if you can see it at the bottom. It's the fact that Neal and I were just awarded scholarships from Kosciuszko Foundation to go to Yale.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, simultaneously, I got accepted to PhD studies at Yale. She got accepted to PhD studies at Berkeley. This was going to be tough to arrange, right? So that's a heck of a commute. So we decided on Connecticut, and so then we went to New Haven, and by that time, Barbara Backus McCorkle, we were still stocking the Backus family, right? She had moved on to New Haven as well. So we continued our connections with the Backuses because, the kids would keep coming by and all that. And so we were just moving this party all across the country.
And I want to just add that Rob reminded me at lunch today that I asked him one time when we were, how did your mom get that fantastic job working at the library at Yale? And I thought it was the best job possible. And this is where the practical side of me decided anywhere that Neal goes as a professor, there's going to be a library. And this program prepared me with languages, language expertise. And I had already several others before I got into this program. Plus, knowing a little bit about a lot of things. And I thought that was a perfect segue into a library career. So while Neal was doing his PhD, I did my library degree and then went on to work at Yale as a librarian.
Speaking of segues, where are we now?
Oh.
Are we finishing our degrees?
Okay.
Okay.
Jump
by this
forward.
time, we're into our professional lives. We finish up in New Haven, Eva's a full-fledged librarian by this time. I'm a freshly minted PhD. And we go to Milwaukee, where we've been at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee for the last, I don't want to say how long. But at this point, what we want to do is just talk about a couple of maybe the more interesting things that have happened to us in our professional lives since going to Milwaukee, with the idea that, where you start at Kansas and who knows where it can send you, right? This is actually in Warsaw at the American Embassy there. And you want to explain why we're there?
Okay. I forget what year this was.
2006.
Okay.
You want me to talk
No,
about
that's
that?
okay. Okay. This is actually was the topic that we were going to talk about at greater length, but we got involved with the transfer of medieval manuscripts to Poland, and somebody said, "Well, did you steal them?" No, we were not. That was not true. During World War II, there was a soldier who had been with the 347th Corps of Engineers. He was from Wisconsin, and he was at the time when the front, the Russians were ousting the Germans, they were heading out back to Germany. He had found himself in the area around Austria. The Russians, the Americans were bombing the trains that were leaving both Germany and Poland. And many of them were, they were soldiers, German soldiers, and also they had filled the trains with they had looted the museums, the libraries, all precious things they were bringing them into Germany for safekeeping. This American soldier is apparently walking along here, and in the mud finds packets would look like cardboard, and with some papers inside, and he picks them up, throws them in his backpack. And when he returns from the war back to Wisconsin, when families gathered, he would take these out, and what was inside were manuscripts. But he really didn't understand what they were. But this is what he found at the war, and he would show these off. When he died in around 1998, his son was disposing of his estate, and noticed that on the back of these manuscripts were seals that said Breslau and had the German eagle on it, and realized that these really they need to be returned somehow. So he turned them into the archives at the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, and that's where we got involved.
Short version, they decided these were the archives that were in the formerly Eastern German city of Breslau, which since World War II, of course, has been the Polish city of Wrocław, and the decision was made that they wanted to repatriate these documents back to the archive, formerly Breslau, now Wrocław. The Archdiocese of Milwaukee needed to find somebody to schlep these back to Poland, and the Polish side and the Archdiocese agreed that Ewa and I would be the likely candidates, and we weren't arguing, since this meant that they were going to pay for our flight and all of that. So we fly back to Poland bearing a briefcase full of these manuscripts on vellum, like 700 years old and all of that. And we had no idea what a big deal this was going to be.
Until we got to the airport of Warsaw, and we were greeted by the director of the National Archives, all kinds of dignitaries, Polish television, cameras, and people were crying when we came off the airplane. And it wasn't because they were seeing us. It was because when we handed over the box, we realized this was truly a historical event, that these were being returned to Poland. Because if you've looked at and studied any of what happened after the war, many items were either lost, stolen, destroyed, or they're up for sale. And this was unusual to get. There were 17 of these. To get these back, there was no monetary exchange. It was through the goodness of a family that these were being returned. And word got out quickly. We were invited by the ambassador to come and meet with him. And then a couple of quick slides. As Neal mentioned, these were on vellum, which is skin, an animal skin, which meant they preserved, even though the earliest was from 1256. And this is from Pope Alexander. And these were not, some kind of treaties and things like that. These were a pretty pedestrian real estate transaction where the Pope or the bishops are giving rights to various knights and princes back in Poland. And some of them were exchanges with various dignitaries in Poland. The authenticity with the seals, we had wax seals, metal seals, we had pieces of wax, and trying to figure out how to keep these intact as we were transporting these. The different linen ribbons designate the writers. I mean, there's different color codes. If it's from the Pope, it's from a bishop. We are not medievalists, so not going to try to understand and explain all of this. But they spoke to the authenticity of these. And as a matter of fact, in Wrocław, in the archives, the archives themselves and the ledgers were not destroyed, so they had entries for these specific documents, which is why they were able to identify that, yes, indeed, these were their documents, except they had a note lost in the war. And, and they had partner documents, so this really completed a vacuum in their holdings.
I might just mention again, sort of, we had no idea what a big deal this was considered to be. The day after the ceremonial handing over of the documents in Wrocław, our landlord brought us the next morning a copy of that day's edition of Gazeta Wyborcza, which is the main daily in Warsaw. And there was this banner headline. I mean, probably the prize document was one that is attributed to King Władysław Łokietek,
which is, I think, this one
Władysław the Short, back in the 14th century. And so the headline said something like,
Łokietek wraca walizce.
Yeah, King Władysław the Short returns in a briefcase. Okay, that's fine.
Well, this caused a little bit of a problem for me because I hadn't told my hundreds of relatives that I was coming to Poland. And here it was on Polish television, headlines in the paper. I was like, whoops, I guess we got to see the relatives too. Okay. And I think one of the other documents up there was from Pope Gregory to the local abbots, telling them that they have fishing rights in a certain pond. So just giving you idea that with no Skype and things like that, how the communications, and some of it was very, very down to earth pedestrian. But this turned a couple of this is Wrocław, and we had private. They really treated us quite well. We had private tours of some of the wonderful archives throughout the city, and the Ossolineum archives, and we had drivers and guides. And this is Kraków on September 1st.
Hence the title.
Yeah.
We had to throw something in the crowd to make the title work.
And Warsaw, of course. And Zakopane. So that was, okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about, and we've had many other trips to Poland, but that was one we really wanted to highlight.
We got a few minutes, right?
Yes.
I mean, this isn't Slavic, but hey, it used to be Soviet, so we'll count it. And this was one of our, shall we say, more exciting trips.
Yeah.
You started, it was your fault.
Being the library director has a lot of benefits. It means I get to promote the collections and sometimes get to travel with them. One of the collections that we have are rare photographs from 1920s of the Republic of Georgia. They have never been seen by anyone in Georgia until a researcher came to UWM and said, we got to take these back. And working with him, we got funding from the State Department. The embassy in Tbilisi invited us as guests of the U.S. government to come. And I remember
Let me point out, this is early 2008.
When I said to Neal, do you want to come with me?
I said, are you crazy? There's going to be a war there very shortly.
I didn't believe him. I said, hey, it's an adventure. Let's go off. So we did. And share with you. Oh, this is in Tbilisi, yeah?
Yes, of course, Georgia, I don't know why my hair is doing that, but I mean, this is after the fall of USSR, but hey, hometown boys, even so. Stalin, of course, is a native of Georgia, and Tbilisi is not far from Gori, his very hometown. And actually, as we were told, if we were to believe it, one of our Georgian guides was the granddaughter of the Stalin family landlord or something. I'm just passing on the story.
Okay. We were part of an official delegation. We had translators. I was meeting with librarians, archivists, to the state of the archives and libraries in Georgia when we were there needed some upgrading, and so we were consulting with them. We went up to the Caucasus to open the exhibit of the pictures of the area. The first one, the one on your right, is one we took while we were there. The one on the left was one of the archival photos done in 1928.
9.
As you can see, nothing's changed.
This is very close to the Russian frontier. You know, it's like 4 kilometers from Russia.
Okay, this is at the grand opening, and we were presented hats that we were less than thrilled, but
It's really not bad.
Yeah. They itch.
they're made of rough wool. And then the entire village came out and had a celebration. All the women cooked. It was in a cave in the town. And you want to tell them what's going on? Well, we're drinking, and they have a custom of toasts that go on for hours, and there's men dancing, and everybody's having a wonderful time.
The exhibit opened on August 7th, 2008, and this is the evening of August 7th. And if any of you recall, a couple of years ago, at the very moment that we're eating and drinking to great excess here, the Georgian-Russian war is breaking out around us. So, shall we say, this shortened and considerably complicated our Georgian visit.
And we actually luckily we were with the embassy staff, so we were taking
That's dust, not smoke.
Yeah.
We're not being strafed.
No, but we were given orders and had to stay with a delegate. There was a whole evacuation process, and we were also evacuating citizens from Turkey and Israel, the countries that the U.S. had relations with, and with a convoy. And it was a little tense. And while the roads were probably the worst thing that we could deal with. But while we were coming down, there were avalanches and things to deal with. Which if you see this smoke down ahead, you can only imagine the worst. And as we're going, and they kept changing routes because they were going to evacuate us out of different cities, different airports. And as we approached, they kept closing down airports for fear of invasion. And so we finally were driven to the Turkish border and said, walk across. Hope everything works out for you.
Could have used a few classes in Turkish before we went. But as you can see, we survived, and this is us in more normal.
In Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So even though we're no longer in Kansas, but I do want to say that I owe a world of gratitude to this program. First of all, on a personal level, 38 years ago. Having met Neal, and also on a professional level, the program prepared me to go into, again, not the traditional route, but produced a librarian. And I'm not the only one, because in my year that I was here, there was only 2 women in my program, and both of us are now library directors. So you can add that as career paths, right? But we've continued our involvement with Polish studies in the community. I think because I did major in Polish literature. I run a Polish book club in Milwaukee. I put together and started a Polish reading library at the Polish Center. We sponsor lectures, movies. Also, we were involved in setting in the sister city relationship with Białystok and Milwaukee. And Slavic is broad, so the Slovenians have adopted me as one of their own because my library has the largest Slovenian music collection outside of Slovenia, Ljubljana, and the whole Slavic connection continues. And as the library director, I get the privilege of calling the shots, setting priorities, and reallocating funds. So if you go out to my library website and look at materials we've digitized, you'll find a collection of World War II photos of the bombing of Warsaw, documentation of Polish Americans in Milwaukee, and also other Polish areas. So I know we heard this morning about being unbiased. I admit to being biased, and I push that agenda.
That's all. Yeah.